नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जयमुदीरयेत् नष्टप्रायेषु अभद्रेषु नित्यं भागवत सेवया भगवती उत्तम श्लोके भक्तिर्भवति नैष्टिकी. So today we are reading from chapter 8 from Bhagavad Gita, titled Attaining the Supreme, and the verse, which is one of the top 108 verses of Bhagavad Gita, is verse number 6. So today we are going to read Bhagavad Gita 8.6. Yam yam vapi smaran bhavam tyajyate antikalebaram tam tam eva tikonteya sada tad bhava bhavita yam yam vapi smaran bhavam त्यजति अन्ते कलेवरम तम तम एव तिकोन्तेय सदा तत् भाव भावित. Any Prabhuji or Mataji would like to read?
Yam yam vapi smaran bhavam Tajatya ante kalevaram Tam tam evaiti kaunteya Sada tadbhava bhavitaha.
Yam yam vapi saranan bhajam.
Yam yam vapi smaran bhavam
Tajati ante kalevaram. Tam tam evaiti kaunteya. Sada tat bhava bhavitaho.
Yang yang vyapi smaran bhavam yajante kalevaram tam tam eva tikanteya tada tadbhava bhavita.
Yam yam vyapi smaram bhavam
Yang yang vyapi
smaran bhavam
Tyajati ante kalevaram Tam tam evati kaunteya
tam tam evati kaunteya
Sada tadbhava bhavitaha.
tada tadbhava bhavita.
Word by word meaning. Yam yam,
Yam yam,
whatever. Va api,
vapi,
at all.
all,
Smaran, remembering. Bhavam,
Bhavam
nature. Tyajati,
Tajati,
yajati
gives up.
gives up,
Ante,
ante,
at the end.
at the end,
Kalevaram,
kalevaram,
this body.
this body,
Tam tam,
tam,
similar.
similar,
Eva,
eva,
certainly.
certainly,
Eti,
iti,
gets.
gets,
Kaunteya,
kaunteya,
O son of Kunti.
O son of Kunti,
Sada,
sada,
always.
always,
Tat,
tat,
that.
that,
Bhava,
Bhava.
state of being.
State
state
of
of
being.
being.
Bhavita,
Bhavita.
remembering.
Remembering.
Translation by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, Swami Prabhupada ki jai. Whatever state of being
Whatever state
Whatever
of
state
being
of being
whatever state of being
one remembers
one
one
remembers
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 when he quits his body,
when
when
he
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 quits
quits
his
his
body,
body,
O son of Kunti,
ocean
O
of
son of
son of
Kunti,
Kunti,
that state
that
that
state
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 he will attain without fail.
he
he
will
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 attain
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 without
without
fail.
fail.
So, any Prabhuji or Mataji would like to read this page of purport of by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, Swami Prabhupada ki jai.
The process of changing one's nature at the critical moment of death is here explained. A person who, at the end of his life, quits his body thinking of Krishna attains the transcendental nature of the Supreme Lord. But it is not true that a person who thinks of something other than Krishna attains the same transcendental state. This is a point we should note very carefully. How can one die in the proper state of mind? Maharaja Bharata, although a great personality, thought of a deer at the end of his life, and so in his next life, he was transferred into the body of a deer. Although as a deer, he remembered his past activities, he had to accept that animal body.
Anyone else would like to read the next page as shown here?
Oh, I think you have not changed it. No, it got changed.
Of course, one's thoughts during the course of one's life accumulate to influence one's thoughts at the moment of the death. So this life creates one's next life. If in one's present life one lives in the mode of goodness and always thinks of Krishna, it is possible for one to remember Krishna at the end of one's life. That will help one be transferred to the transcendental nature of Krishna. If one is transcendentally absorbed in Krishna's service, then his next body will be transcendental, spiritual, and not material. Therefore, the chanting of Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, is the best process for successfully changing one state of being at the end of one's life.
Okay, so now let's chant the pranam mantra together so that we could save some time. And I had shared the pranam mantra to you in the WhatsApp. So let's all chant together, not following each other, together. अज्ञानतिमिरन्दस्य
अज्ञानतिमिरान्धस्य
ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया
ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकाय
चक्षुर्मृतं येन
चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन
तस्मै
तस्मै
श्रीगुरवे
श्रीगुरवे
नमो
Sri
नमः
Chaitanya Manovistam Sthapitam Yena
श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं
Bhutale
स्थापितं
स्थापितं
येन
येन
Swayam Rupa
भूतले
भूतले
Kada
स्वयं
स्वयं
रूप
रूपः
कदा
Rupa
कदा
Kada
मह्यं
मह्यं
Dhyam
ददाति
ददाति
Swapadantikam
स्वपदान्तिकं
स्वपदान्तिकं
वन्देऽहं
वन्देऽहं
Vandeham
श्रीगुरो
Guru
श्रीयुतपदकमलं
श्रीयुतपादकमलं
श्रीगुरून्
श्रीगुरून्
Gurun
वैष्णवांश्च
वैष्णवांश्च
Vaishnavamcha
श्रीरूपं
Gurupam
साग्रजातं
साग्रजातं
Sagrajatam
सहगण
Sagana
सहगणरघुनाथान्वितं
रघुनाथान्वितं
Lalitam
वितं
तं
तं
सजीवं
सजीवं
साद्वैतं
पीतं
सावधूतं
Savadutam Parijana
परिजनसहितं
परिजनसहितं
Sahitam Chaitanya
कृष्णचैतन्यदेवं
Devam Sri
श्रीराधाकृष्ण
Radha Krishna
पादं
श्रीराधाकृष्णपादं
सहगण
Radha
ललिता
Lalita
सहगणललिता
Lalita
श्रीविशाखान्वितं
श्रीविशाखान्वितं
Visakhanavitam
च
Cha
च
हे
हे
He
कृष्णा
कृष्ण
Krishna
करुण
करुणा
Karuna
सिन्धो
सिन्धु
दीनबन्धो
दीनबन्धु
Dinabandhu
जगत्पते
जगत्पते
Jagatpate
गोपेश
गोपेश
Gopika
गोपिका
Gopika
कान्त
Kanta
गोपिकान्त
Radha
राधाकान्त
राधाकान्त
Kanta
नमस्तुते
नमस्ते
Namaste
तप्त
तप्तकाञ्चन
काञ्चन
Tapta
गौराङ्गी
Gaurangi
गौराङ्गी
राधे
राधा
Radhe
वृन्दावनेश्वरी
Vrindavaneshwari
वृन्दावनेश्वरी
वृषभानुसुते
वृषभानुसुते
Vrishabhanusuते
देवी
देवी
Devi
प्रणमामि
प्रणमामि
Pranamami Hari
हरिप्रिये
Priye
हरिप्रिये
वंशकल्पतरुभ्यश्च
वाञ्छकल्पतरुभ्यश्च
कृपा
कृपा सिन्धुभ्य
सिन्धुभ्यैव
एव
च
च पतितानं
पतितानां
पावनेभ्यो
पावनेभ्यो
वैष्णवेभ्यो
वैष्णवेभ्यो
नमो
नमो
नमः
नमो जय
जय
श्री
श्रीकृष्ण
कृष्ण
चैतन्य
चैतन्य
प्रभु
प्रभु
नित्यानन्द
नित्यानंद
श्री
श्री
अद्वैत
अद्वैत
गदाधर
गदाधर
श्रीवासादि
शिवासादि
Sadi Gaura
गौरभक्तवृन्द
Bhakta
हरे
हरे
Hare
कृष्णा
कृष्णा
Krishna,
हरे
हरे
Hare
कृष्णा
Krishna,
कृष्णा
Krishna
कृष्णा
कृष्णा
Krishna,
हरे
हरे
Hare
हरे
हरे
Hare,
हरे
Hare
राम
हरे
Rama,
हरे
Hare
राम
राम
Rama,
राम
Rama
राम
राम
Rama,
राम
हरे
Hare
हरे
Hare.
हरे
हरे. So thank you so much for joining this wonderful Sangha of Bhagavad Gita, where we take one verse at a time. We take some of the top 108 verses of the 700 verses of Bhagavad Gita, and we try to reflect on it, discuss among ourselves, and we try to learn from each other because some of these theory may appear very uh, powerful, but when you apply it through the application, it tends to turn into realization, and that tends to turn into transformation. So how one person realizes these words is different from all of us. So we tend to learn from each other by going through this very powerful verse where Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Purna Purushottam Sri Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is saying, Yam yam vyapi smaran bhavam tajati ante kalevaram. He's using the word ante. That means at the end of life. Kalevaram, you might have heard about Nava Kalevara. Nava Kalevara means Lord Jagannath takes his body and goes into a new body. Nava Kalevaram. Like that, Krishna is using the word Kalevaram. That means this body, right? And tam tam evati Kaunteya, and he's referring to Arjuna, who is Kaunteya, he's the son of Kunti. Sada tat bhava bhavita. And at the end, the state of being, the consciousness you are in, that's the reason why our society is called Krishna consciousness, is the consciousness which really matters. And then at the end of life, the state of remembering you are essentially drives the kind of body you take when you transmigrate from one body to another. So here, Prabhupada is translating whatever state of being one remembers when he quits his body, O son of Kunti, that state he will attain without fail. So there are two things Krishna is talking here. He's talking about bhava, the state, the consciousness, um, and then bhavita, the remembrance. At that time, what you're remembering, what kind of thoughts which is coming into your mind. So as you know, there are five gross bodies, right? Gross elements, which basically is controlled by mind. So we have five senses which are controlled by our mind. The way mind takes over, the, the way mind thinks about these senses in terms of usability, it really transcends into a different experience. The same mind can make someone very spiritual by using the senses for the pleasure of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Sometimes the same mind can take you away, like sometimes you'll see the knife which is used to operate uh, a person on the operation theater, which is very positive, can be used to kill a person, which is very negative. So it's essentially this object or the senses, how you tend to use it. You can use a matchbox to light incense for the offering to the lordships, and you can use the incense to light up a cigarette. So essentially, it's the same thing, but how you use it is important. And that's where Krishna is taking it to a very different level by saying, at the end of your life, the consciousness and the remembrance, these two things drive you to a position where you end up being. And that's where Krishna is using the word smaranam. Smaranam is very, very important. It's the sense of remembering. Ante, at the end, Kalevaram, this body, and Sada, always, and Bhava, state of being, and Bhavita is remembering. So, as you can see, it's very important for all of us to inculcate that habit so that at the end of the life, we really have the right sense of consciousness and the right form of remembrance. So, as we discussed last time, another very powerful verse, 8.5, which turned about Antakale, which starts with Antakale. And there we discussed that whenever we're preparing for our semester exam, but at the end of the exam, if we don't pass, we have to repeat that subject. So, likewise, the final exam is when we end our life. We have prepared the whole of this life for that end exam, for that final exam. And that is when, if we don't pass well, if we don't do well, it's not really going to help us. And it's not really going to help us pass through this this constant cycle of birth and death. It will not take us, it will not be enough to escape ourselves from this constant cycle of birth and death, which is why we have to think about sharpening our consciousness. If you may have seen the day before your marriage, you know, you want to meet, some those people who have been through the arranged marriage. They have not been, so you are kind of enthused by, the kind of person you're going to meet. So whenever somebody comes and says hello, good luck and all that, but your focus, your thought process is somewhere else, because you're going to live your life probably 30 years or 40 years or 50 years of your life with a new person, but your thoughts are in a uh, a different place. Even if the person is wishing you, your thoughts are in a different place. That is exactly why our sense of remembering at the end is very important. Because at the end, if we start thinking of our business, of our job, we will probably end up transcending into somebody who will end up doing a job. But at the end of life, if we think about the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who has given, like Krishna in Bhagavad Gita mentions, Aham Bija Pradapita. That means he is the seed giving father of all of us. So if you think about where you came from at the end of your life, with that remembrance, with that state of consciousness in the form of chanting the holy name, that the end will be very nice, because at the end you'll have the biting in the form of thousands of serpents, and that's the reason why death is very, very difficult. So Krishna is saying, at the end of your life, if you have prepared yourself very well and you are conscious of the Supreme Personality of Godhead from whom you have come from, Aham Bija Pradapita, Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, then, as Krishna is saying, you will take the same birth, take the birth depending on your conscious. So yum yum, likewise, whatever, tam tam, Krishna is using. So however you end up doing your end exam, tam tam, likewise, you will take a birth. If you have done a lot of mode of goodness towards the end, and you're remembering the Supreme Personality of Godhead in the mode of goodness, you'll probably transcend into a person who has mode of goodness in the next life. Yam yam tam tam. Krishna is using this very nicely, because Bhagavad Gita is the song of God, and Krishna is the greatest singer in the world when it comes to reciting or explaining this life's greatest principles in the form of a song. Yum yum tam tam. So exactly like how you deal with your how in your remembrance and consciousness at the end of the life, you'll transcend exactly like that. So in Srimad Bhagavatam, there is references to Ante Narayana Smriti. Srimad Bhagavatam, second canto, first chapter, sixth verse, SP 2.1.6 says, Etavan Sankhya Yoga Bhyam Swadharma Parinistithaya Janma Labha Para Pumsa Ante Narayana Smriti. Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita has spoken, Krishna is saying, but if you really want to validate, Vyasadeva in Srimad Bhagavatam said, the highest perfection of human life, achieved either by complete knowledge of matter and spirit, by practice of mystic powers, or by perfect discharge of occupational duty, is to remember the personality of Godhead at the end of life. Ante Narayana Smriti. Srimad Bhagavatam is certifying that as well. Ante Narayana Smriti. That's how we should end our life. All this Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita discussions are essentially preparation for the final exam, and no one knows the examination date. That's the reason why we should all collectively think, dwell, discuss, and analyze the the verses which Krishna has spoken from his golden lotus mouth, and we should see what our acharyas have said in various different verses. So, in this verse, Srila Prabhupada has invoked Bharat Maharaj. Bharat Maharaj, as you know, is the son of Risavdev, who is actually Supreme Personality of Godhead himself. So Bharat Maharaj was a very potent, very conscious, very knowledgeable person, and in his name we have our country called Bharat. So Bharat Maharaj is is about to go to Vanaprastha, and as you know, we have, after you retire, you take up Vanaprastha. So here, Bharat Maharaj takes up the process of Vanaprastha, and he goes to perform devotional service in a forest. And he was near Gandaki River, where he was in his hermitage doing the the final um, spiritual processes, Krishna conscious processes in calling out, doing sacrifices in the form of yajna, whatever a typical hermit would end up doing. So there, what he did was he was seeing a pregnant deer was coming across a stream of water, and a lion was chasing the pregnant deer. So in order to prepare to save the deer, to save the deer, he tried to go forward, but the deer did a miscarriage in the form that a fawn was born, a calf deer was born, and the mother deer died. And in that situation, Bharat Maharaj took that fawn deer who was born from the mother deer who was under the attack from the lion. And then he loved the fawn, the calf deer beautifully. He grew a lot of love. And when he was doing it, he kind of did not pay that much importance to the consciousness activities, Krishna consciousness activities he was doing. He was in too much of attachment to the fawn deer, the child deer. And calf deers are beautiful. So who would not fall in love with them? So Bharat Maharaj fell in love with that deer. And one day, the fawn grew, the deer somehow got lost into the forest and he couldn't find it. And he was going after the footsteps of the deer as to where he went. And he could see that in the moon, from the blackishness in the moon, could that be the step of the deer? Could that be the footstep of the deer? So, with that little thought of deep, intense feeling for the attachment for the deer, Bharat Maharaj passed away. He left his body. As Krishna says, yam yam, you meditate, you have your consciousness state, tam tam, likewise, you'll get your birth. So Bharat Maharaj left his life thinking deeply, intensely about the fawn deer, the child deer. And the next birth, Bharat Maharaj became a deer. Bharat Maharaj became a deer, and then he, but as these personalities, Bharat Maharaj, Rishabh Dev, they are wonderful personalities. We do not remember anything. Whatever we have heard 2 days back, also we tend to forget. There are personalities who have very tremendous power about the memory. They remember 1 year old things, 5 year old things, 10-year-old things. But there are super personalities, not supremes, super personalities like Bharat Maharaj, who remembers his state in the life before. He could remember. So as a deer, he was, practicing, the sense of taking bath regularly on a stream and living from the grass and trying not to trample any insect. So he led a very wonderful life as the deer. And then when he left his body, he still has it attachment. He was born as a as a boy, strong and stout boy, but he has so much of knowledge from the Krishna consciousness philosophy that he did not utter a word in the next birth. When he did not utter anything in that subsequent life, subsequent birth, people thought he is Jada Bharat. He couldn't speak, he couldn't say anything. So, and his siblings gave him trouble, but as he was a Krishna consciousness person, he never bothered to care, and he still lived. And time came, then he had to leave his house. So Bharat Maharaj, in his third birth, first birth being the king and the son of Rishabdev, the second life being a deer, and the third life as Jada Bharat, he left his house. And at that time, there was a king whose name was Rahugan. He was going in a palanquin, and one person from the palanquin fell ill, and they were looking for someone. And Jada Bharat was around. He was strong and stout. So they asked him to come and pull the palanquin of the king. The name of the king is Rahugan. Rahugan was a very potent king, but this he had the mode of passion because he was a king. So when Jadabharat used to take the palanquin, where Rahugan, as you can see on the right picture, whenever there will be an ant or insect while Jadabharat was carrying the palanquin, he would he would struttle, he would not step on the ant. So Rahugan was getting agitated that because he would wait, he would start not step. So the palanquin was in a very unstable position, as you can see in the picture. So Rahugan became very angry. He started abusing. He came out of the palanquin. He said, "You look like a stout person. Are you? What's happening to you? Don't you understand that you have to go nicely?" He kind of chastised, and he hurled abuses at Jadabharat, and and he said, and when Jadabharat was not responding and he was quiet, he said, "I'm going to kill you." Then Jadabharat at the time opened his mouth. He said, "You can kill my body, but you can't kill my soul, because I am not the body, I am the soul." When he said that, Rahugan realized this person is not a simple person. He has he has shown what the deep understanding of where life comes from is. And then there was a wonderful conversation between Rahugan and Jadabharat. So this exemplifies that how you lead your life to the end, how you deal with your life to the end, and the kind of consciousness and the kind of remembrance you have would drive the decision as to what you become. What a wonderful pastime of Bharat Maharaj to um, to think about when you talk about this verse. And the second example we all know, and you can see Ajamil. He is He is surrounded by the the Yamadutas, and then he utters the word Narayan, and Vishnudutas comes on the right. So, just to give a big brief background, Ajamil was raised according to the Vedic regulations. He was a trained Brahmin, but one day when he was on the field collecting flowers for worshipping the Lord, he happened to see some very difficult interaction between a drunkard man and a prostitute engaged in sexual activities, and Ajamil became bewildered. Then, even if Ajamil was having a sense of um, goodness, mode of goodness, but he just couldn't keep his mind together. Then he was constantly thinking about that activity, and then he got the prostitute to his home as a maidservant, and then he sort of abandoned his family. He left his kid, and he lived with the prostitute, and then finally he had many kids through the prostitute who he kept, and then finally, when he was about to die because he didn't take care of his spiritual life, but at the end, when he was about to die, he when there was too much of pain and Yamadutas were there, he called out not to the Lord's name, but he called out to his kid's name, whose son's name was Narayan. So when Narayan was called out with so much of deep intensity, then Krishna looks for a call out to his name, like how we were chanting. Our chanting is essentially calling out to the name of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. So it's an intense call out. When the intense call out happened, Narayan, 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 Vishnu Doots came, as you can see in the picture, and then Yamadutas had to leave. So, however you deal with your life, if at the end, as Krishna is saying in this beautiful verse, Krishna appeared at that instant and took Ajamil with him, cleansing him of his sins in the life, the Lord is waiting for a man to call for him. So the call out of the name, as we discussed, is nothing out of the world. It is mentioned in the scriptures about in this age of Kali, Harer Nama, Harer Nama, Ekevalam, Kalo Nasteva, Nasteva, Nasteva Katyanyatha. That means there is no other way, no other way, no other way. And when Ajamil, such a down uh, trodden uh, consciousness, when he called out to the Lord's name with so much of intensity, he was calling out not to Lord's name, to his son actually. But still, the power of name is so strong that Vishnu Doots came and helped revive uh, Ajamil and cleanse him of his sins. So this innocent utterance of his name is very important because Lord wants to see how we are making a step in to call out his name. When you take a step, Lord takes 10 steps to help you. And that is exactly what is exemplified in this first time. So, so as you can see, it's very, very important that we deal our life in such a way. So when we want to call out the name, at the end, there will be so much of pain in our body. It will not be possible for us to think about the Lord at the time. How can we do Ante Narayana Smriti? How can we do? Because we will be so much of pain that there'll be, we'll be looking out for people to give us some water at the end so that we can leave this body. It's not possible. It's not easy. The only way it's possible is exactly what we discussed. Because when the day before the wedding, somebody is talking to you, giving you good luck, your focus is not there because you're thinking about, you have that element of excitement that you're going to meet someone who you're going to live and love. So that love is very important. Because of that love, you have an element of remembrance. Likewise, if we have that element of love for the Supreme, then only we'll end up remembering. That's the reason why there is nothing in this world other than bhakti, which is nothing but devotional love, which is powerful and enough. The jnana, the yoga, they look pale in front of bhakti because there is love, and there is nothing in this world without love which can really make you smile. Only love can make you smile. And that is the reason why it is mentioned that whatever you do, you have to resort to devotional practice of loving relationship with the Lord. If you do not have the loving relationship of the Lord, it's very difficult to point your head and think about the Supreme at the end. That's the reason why Bhakti Yoga is the topmost yoga system in the world, and there is nothing which can match it. So this verse says it all actually. We don't have to research a lot, but if you really want to understand this verse properly, we have to start loving the lordships. Start loving. The lordships are so merciful that in this age of Kali, whenever we have fever, we go to the hospital. There we see the doctor. But in this age of Kali, we are so much disease, we are so much of falling attitude, the intensity in terms of the mentality is so low that we are so much disease that we cannot leave our houses. So that's the reason why Lord, in the form of Lord of the universe, comes out of his altar to see us during Rath Yatra. Because in this age of Kali, in this age of quarrel and hypocrisy, where the limits, where the levels are way low, the only thing which can only help us is the chanting of the holy name, wherein you build that element of love for the lordships. So that's the reason why, when in this time when there is asking to the Lord, Dhanam Dehi, Jasham Dehi, but the first thing we should all accept is, let us give us that love for the Godhead. If the love for the Godhead is there, then everything else will fall into place. Jasham will come, Dhanam will come, Rupang will come, everything else will come. But if there is no love for the lordships, nothing will come. That's why reason why when you take some blessings from the Vaishnavas, they will say Krishna Matirastu. That means let you have that element of love for the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And if the love is there, then you'll start thinking about him in terms of bhavita. Bhavita means, it's a very common word, it's a Hindi word, it's probably used in every possible language. You'll be constantly remembering about the Supreme Personality of Godhead, with whom you have that element of love, that bhava and bhavita, which is so critical. Your state of consciousness, bhava, and bhavita, what you are remembering, that will drive the final end game. And the only way we can do that is by inculcating that element of that spark of love with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So with that, I'd like to end here, open up for any questions, comments, your thoughts. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Dandavat Pranam. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Hare Krishna, Bodhananda Pranam.
I'm sorry for being late. Yeah, it's in the middle of the yard work, so I didn't realize it was 5. Prabhuji, very nice lecture, as you explained clearly and lucid. It's very easy to understand what is the purpose of life, what Krishna was telling. Point I'll be reiterating only, Prabhuji, but another dimension of it. The love which you are mentioning in the last, that is the most important, Prabhuji. What I want to highlight here is that if we love someone, if we love, automatically surrender will come, because this verse is mainly leads us to surrender to Krishna, right? So the surrender only comes, like for example, in our material life also, in our regular household life, we love our kids. That's why we do sacrifice, and we basically surrender to their wishes many times, and we also um, try to go out of our way, right? Because we love them, right? Prabhuji, similarly, that love is the most important part, which will automatically bring surrender. And once we surrender, we will start practicing. And what are we surrendering to? We are surrendering our senses to not to have distractions. And once we do the practice, then naturally in the end, we will automatically, he will be approaching, as we say, right? Limit tends to approaching. Similarly, here we will be approaching the consciousness what Krishna is asking us to have at the time of the death. Another same in continuation with that, Prabhuji. Um, in the Ajamila example which you have given, Prabhuji, one verse which came to my mind when you were telling that example was Krishna tells that even one of your senses is roaming, right? Even if one of the senses is roaming, you can deviate from the path of Bhakti Yoga. So, point is how to be sturdy. Like as I think in the last example you have given that a wind in the even in the wind the even the flame doesn't flicker if there is no wind, right?
Mhm.
The flame doesn't flicker of the similarly uh, if our senses are always roaming, Prabhuji, we are always out, we go out, we seek out, right? When we seek out these senses, like Ajamila's example, he's one of his senses, he was a very pious Brahmin in his earlier part of the Ajamila's life, right? But just because he had a roaming senses, it got corrupted. So, however pious, he was doing almost 95%, but that 5% what led him to the basically the destruction of his pious life. And another point which I wanted to mention here, Prabhuji, as you are mentioning the examples of exams, I don't know, Prabhuji, I had, especially for board exams, we all had preparation holidays, right? In our life, we may have preparation holidays, we may not have preparation holidays, right? So, so we may have is what we call surprise test, right? We used to have surprise tests.
Mhm.
Similarly, the death is a surprise test, Prabhuji. So it is a continuous preparation which we need to do, which is not that. As I was thinking earlier, that yes, let me. This is part of my retired life. First, let me do my current whatever are obligations. Let me work on those. No, Prabhuji. Krishna consciousness is teaching us that right from our consciousness, as Prahlad Maharaj has told, even at the age of 5 also we can start our Krishna consciousness, but we the more we practice, the better of the preparation, as you have rightly mentioned. And in the case of Ajamila, we had a he had a near death experience and he could come out of it. We may or may not come out of it. Like for example, we may have supplementary exam, we may not have a supplementary exam chance, right?
Mhm.
There is either one, there is only one chance and we may fail, right?
Mhm.
So these are the points which are coming to my mind when you're explaining that we may have these or we may not have these. We may not have a supplementary exam chance, right?
Mhm.
So we should always try to be prepared for the surprise test without having the without having the notion that we may have supplementary. Okay, if not this, I will pass in the supplementary exam, right? So and all this culminates to, as you have rightly told, love, and that love automatically brings surrender, and we can practice this. Thank you, Guru.
Yeah, yeah. So nice points you raised about Jamil had a chance for a supplementary test, because, but we may not have that. And you talked about our life is more of a surprise test in terms of how the end is going to arrive. And you mentioned about how love transcends to surrender. So these are all wonderful points, actually, when you think about, as you hear in this COVID, there are many situations when people at a very young age they are leaving. They are not left for a old age or anything like that, and you know, so these are all very valid point, considering we are in a very challenging situation, and how this cooling aspect of Krishna consciousness can help us in our life. So So thank you so much for sharing. These are all wonderful points in terms of the surprise test, in terms of no supplementary possible, needing for us to surrender, and Jamil, by his bias credit, may have some way to really avert the last final call, but we may not. Some very nice points, Prabhu. Thank you so much for
Thank you,
sharing.
Prabhu. Yeah, thank
Thank you. It's all wonderful points.
you. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna. Any other comments or questions from anyone?
Yes, Prabhu, wonderful class and wonderful sloka also. This is the ultimate goal of the human life. Whatever Bhagavan Krishna told in this verse, that is the ultimate thing actually. That is the ultimate things, and what will be our goal? What should be our goal? That is here described, and you describe very nicely and very beautifully. Also, Bhakti Ratnakar Prabhu gave the told that there is no supplementary taste. Maybe we will not get that get chance to get to take the supplementary taste. So that is also very nice point. And so yes, Prabhu, and one thing is that uh, love is the key ingredients. Anything you want to do with love, that will be that will come out as a very good way. So that is correct. And but to develop the love, we need the effort also. So that's why we are doing the effort. We are not that a stage to develop in that loving stage. So we are not in that stage. So we need to practice and practice. Then we get the taste, and then we develop love.
Yeah. Yes.
So
Yeah. Thank you, Prabhu, for sharing that last point. Because in a marriage or in a wedding, what happens? Uh, even in order to maintain love, you have to work for it. It is not that you don't do anything to maintain love and it will keep on showering that love. We really have to do some of the details, as you mentioned, the practice of caring, thinking, trying to complement each other, trying to help out each other. Then only the love is maintained. So that's exactly like that in our spiritual life. If we do not constantly chant, we do not hear or discuss Bhagavad Gita or Srimad Bhagavatam, then gradually we'll forget, and Antakale is going to be a challenge. So practice, as you touched on it, Prabhu, which is the main aspect which not many people talk about. We all talk about theory, in terms of love, surrender, but the most important thing in all of this is practice. If there is no practice, no love is going to survive. The wedding is going to fall off very soon. So we have to make an effort to love. We have to make an effort to go to Mangalarati, make an effort to go to Sunday Love Feast, meet with devotees, understand their perception, be part of the festival, what Krishna went through. In a month, Krishna will be lifting Govardhan Hill. And the kind of surrender the Vrajavasis had. If somebody says, okay, I have this box, come under the box, and that is a kid, I won't go under the box because he may fall. But the kind of surrender Vrajavasis had, they didn't think twice. They all came under the mountain which Krishna lifted in his pinky, and they survived for 7 days the wrath of Indra. It's wonderful uh, pastime to really immerse ourselves and think about the pastimes. So if we do not keep up that, if we do not have the practicing, we are all practicing sadhakas, right? So practice is very important. Once the practice goes away, the shot, cricketing shot, which was coming very easy to you at one point in time, will not happen like that. So every time there is practice, and you touched on it. So I thought I would like to mention that. Thank you so much, Prabhuji. Any other question or comments or your thoughts, realizations?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
Wonderful lecture. Yeah, I just have one question. Maybe that looks like very silly. Just want to know, like, for example, let's say one guy, or let's say one, he's doing crime throughout his life, and he's doing all kind of sin activities. But let's say at the end of his life, let's say he, because he reads the Bhagavad Gita and he knows the sloka, right, 8.5 and 8.6. Let's say at the end of his life, let's say he just think of Krishna. I know that's not possible, but is there any way that he can still go to like Godhead?
Yeah, so the example, Prabhu, we mentioned was about Ajamil. Ajamil was exactly doing that. He was a very bad person. He was, I mean, towards the end of his life, when he started living with a prostitute through whom he beget many kids, he was actually not a good person. He left his wife. So, so based on the scriptural reference, and this Ajamal pastime is there in Srimad Bhagavatam. It's not really something which is just created in this Kali Yuga. It is pretty much written by Vyasadeva long time. So our see, whenever we have a law, we have a case, right? So the lawyers, they look for precedents. They look for, hey, in Pennsylvania during this time or this time, a similar case, the judge gave this much punishment. This was the outcome of this. So in our scriptures, we can only talk from Guru Sadhu Sastra. We cannot talk from anywhere else. That's the reason why our scriptures have reference. So to answer your question, technically yes, but the practicality part you touched on. But let me also tell you that in scriptures is mentioned that when the death comes, there will be hundreds and thousands of serpents there biting you. The pain will be so much. So for a person who has indulged in that kind of a life, it's very, very difficult to really. But Ajamil was a very pure Brahmana in the beginning of the life. So you tend to have, when you think about, when you sometimes you dream, you tend to dream about some good old days, right? Because it is part and parcel of your memory register process. So if you have done something good and you turned out bad, Krishna has relieved Valmiki. His whole life was Ratnakar, and you know what he did. So there are precedents. So that's the reason why in our Krishna conscious movement, there are in 60s and 70s, there are many challenging sannyas, many challenging people who have joined, but they turned their life. That's why that's why Prabhupada says, I turned a lot of hippies into happies. So transformation is there, and transformation can happen. And Krishna is very merciful. Lord Jagannath is very merciful. We just have to come back to where we belong. If we come back in the 50 year or 60 year, it doesn't matter as long as we come back. But as Bhakti Ratnakar mentioned, it's easy to come back at an early age, because at the late age is very, very difficult. But that doesn't mean people who have joined late have not grown up. Actually, if you think about it, Bhakti Charu Maharaj, one of our prominent sannyasis, he joined ISKCON not at a very young age, I would say, not at 17 or 20. And he did not have Srila Prabhupada association for more than probably 9 to 12 months. Many sannyasis in our movement have 10 years of association of Srila Prabhupada. And Srila Prabhupada, he probably didn't have more than 4 times association with Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur. So it's not a question of time, it's a question of quality. It's not a question of quantity. So there are people who have really turned things around in their bhakti life at a very different time. So everything is possible. This is not a Krishna can choose to reveal himself. So who are we to say that this kind of things can never happen? So it can happen. It has happened. There is hope in bhakti, and we are supposed not to give it up. Okay, Prabhuji?
Yes, Prabhuji. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Any other comments or questions?
One point, Prabhuji, on Niranjan Prabhuji's point. That's why Krishna, as we have discussed last time, Prabhuji, Krishna says you have to practice. You have to have commitment and you have to have practice. Then it's very easy to get those things. So overnight, can we get this? As Prabhuji has mentioned, yeah, if you had prior credits, and you can get overnight, but the chances are very, 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 very slim, Prabhuji, right? Chances are there, but it depends whether you had those prior credits or not. Since we fall in the other 99.9%, so we have only two choices: commit ourselves and practice it. But this is not a obligation, Prabhuji. It gives you very internal and spiritual bliss, actually. If we sincerely practice and we surrender, we get that bliss. So even during the practice, you get a bliss. Very rarely we get bliss during practice sessions, right? When we are studying, Prabhuji, we are struggle, and we may get the concept, we may not get the concept. We don't get the concept, we try to memorize it. We get the concept, great, we move forward, right? So in a sense, Prabhuji, what I think this verse is trying to tell us is that you have to have practice, because as we have last time discussed, death is very, very, very painful. As Prabhuji has mentioned, it is very painful, Prabhuji. That time it's very easy not to think of Krishna. But if we even unknowingly and a subconscious level, if we say Krishna, Krishna, that will save, as in the case of Ajamila, Narayana. See, unconsciously, he didn't mean the actual Narayana, he meant his son, but still the efficacy of the name is there, the potency and the efficacy of the name is there. So we should not undermine practice, Prabhuji. That's one point which I wanted to
Right,
mention.
exactly. And then, as Prabhuji mentioned, we should think that we are part of that 99.99% and not let Krishna do miracle for us. So we should follow what our acharyas have said. Acharyati, achar means through our constant behavior, through our constant acharan, through our constant practice, we do that. Sometimes when you make kheer, if you boil everything, mix it and do commit, put it in 100, 200-degree temperature, in 15 minutes, it will not taste good. But if you simmer it, you give some time. So in bhakti, you have to give some time. It is very pleasurable, as Prabhuji said, and it has its advantages. You'll be happy, you will have advantages. At the same time, you are sharpening your principles in the course of time. Okay, Prabhuji?
Thank you, Prabhuji. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other
Yes,
comments?
So,
go ahead, Prabhu,
Yes,
go ahead, Prabhu.
no, I was just I had a small comments and the whole thing. So I think it's a very powerful verse as I got explained. So here what I see is that Krishna is talking about the truth table, the axiom that at the last moment, whatever you think, that's what your next life would be. So there is no question about that. Like he has already put the framework in place. Like we get birth, we get life after the death, and so it was a continuum, right? But who decides and how it decides? This is where he prescribes the formula that this is what happens, right? So that is the truth table he has put in, saying that after this life, what would be my next life, and that is basically Krishna has said, like in the end, whatever you're thinking, that's what is going to be, right? So now the question is, how do we make sure that we get to the situation so that we can decide our next thing? That's how all the examples are coming in, saying that Ajamil or other things. Like in this example, for example, in Ajamil example, right? The two things is being basically described there. One is that even though he was a pious Brahmin, but how small things can derail you from what you're doing. Like you are practicing or doing all the good thing, but since still it is a very slippery road, and then a small thing can deviate you. The reason that was explained there, so that all the Vaishnavas or all the followers going on that path can see that what can derail them and what they should do or not do, kind of say do or not don't do kind of situation that's given. Again, the next example is given that even though he was already like, in the downward path, but then a small things can bring you back to there. So that's why the practice, even though on this sloka Krishna didn't talk about the practice, he has mentioned the practice or yoga abhyas or the abhyas can make things perfect and even though he didn't mention here, but we have to understand that this is possible. One example is that Ajamel giving that, he just, because of he might be calling all the times his son, so he did that and that he got back there. And other example I can think of is that I saw the end video of Prabhupada, where at the end, even though he was in subconscious state, anybody asking him anything, he was able to translate the Krishna, like the the Gita and other things. So that is possible because of the practice. So that's why the importance is that if we want to basically make sure that we get to the same situation and at the last moment we can really think of Krishna name. These are the examples that if Prabhupada could do it, if Ajamil could do it, then everybody can do it. So that way we can practice and basically we can get to that situation. And when the things comes, like just like till the last moment, we are not forgetting to take our breath, right? So breath happens inbuilt into our body system, right? Similarly, if always we chant Krishna, 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 so at that moment also, even though there are a lot of pain, you might be subconsciously always talking about Krishna and all. So that's how it can be possible. So, that's what it's a very powerful words, even though when I read it sometime that I didn't realize that, but thanks Prabhuji, I understand that now and what they're talking about and why they're talking about all these things. So hopefully we'll be means I'll be able to see this and see the things what to subscribe, like what we shouldn't do, kind of things from this course. Thank
Very
you,
nice,
Prabhuji.
very nice for sharing your heart. And for what Prabhuji mentioned, the key tenet of that is practice. As Ashish Karuna Jagannath Das Prabhu mentioned some time back as well, practice, and everybody, Bhakti Ratnakar Prabhu mentioned, Sridhar Prabhu mentioned practice. So practice is a very common theme which is really coming out of this. Practice in chanting, quality chanting, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, in the morning in a quality atmosphere. It definitely helps. It has helped millions and millions of people, and it will definitely help. So, so thank you, Prabhu, for internalizing this and and discussing about the importance of practice. So, and sometimes if you think, if you played cricket at a young age and after 20 years you're holding a bat, that some conscious aspect of holding the bat, the way you hold the bat, the way you swing, will tell the person who has played cricket that he has truly played cricket 20 years back. It's just the sheer holding. So never give up this practice, because this practice is going to stick with you, because a person has been through this practice form of Hare Krishna mantra, and then he goes different places. He forgets about Krishna. Then he comes back to village, and then there was a Hare Krishna party going and chanting the holy name, and he just connected with the heart, and then he went behind. And it doesn't really happen to, just so you know, it doesn't happen to human beings. In Vrindavan, there are many dogs on the street. They'll be following the Hare Krishna Mahamantra, because this mantra is so powerful. That's why it's called Maha Mantra. It's the topmost mantra. And in the streets of Vrindavan, you'll see many dogs following the Hare Krishna party. And some people, that these dogs will never leave the Hare Krishna party. So practice. The practice will stay with you and it will never leave you. And when the time of reconnection comes, it will reconnect. The subconscious aspect Prabhuji talked about. So with that, I'd like to end here. If there is no other question, so let's all chant the Vaishnava Pranam mantra and say Vancha kalpataruvescha
Vishnu
kripa
Kripa
sindhu
Sindhu Vai Vacho Patitanam
patitanam
Pavanebhyo
pavanebhyo
Nirbu Vaishnave
Vaishnavebhyo namo namo Vaishnava Vrinda
Mata
ki
Ki Gaudi
jai
Ki
Srila
Jai Gaur
Prabhupada
Vishnu
ki jai
Prabhupada
Prabhupada ki jai
Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai
Hare Krishna.